needed something that had a bit of fanfare to kick off this Ontario election campaign. I guess it officially started at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon when the legislature was dissolved by the lieutenant governor here in the province. The premier making the very long walk, it seemed. It was a long, slow walk to the lieutenant governor's office. So here we are. This is the election campaign version of On the Ledge, otherwise known as the Writ Race, from here until June the 3rd, because we'll have a morning after discussion reading the entrails of what happened on election night. So we will be in your inbox daily, just analyzing, discussing, and beating to death this whole question of where we're going to go from here as far as the province is concerned here in Ontario. Yeah, so here we go. And it's good to start the morning off. Keith Leslie is here. Normally would be joining us from our studios in Nova Scotia, but is here in Toronto this week to take part in the festivities. Sabrina and Angie from the Queen's Park Observer also here. So I guess, Keith, you made a visit to Queen's Park this morning, and the NDP are getting all set. They've got they're the only ones that have a bus.
They were the only ones there this morning with a bus when the campaign. I'm used to seeing, 3 competing buses. Now, it's no surprise Doug Ford doesn't have a bus out there. But I expected the Liberals, especially with a leader who nobody knows. I mean, and they really have to get his name out there the next 29 days. No sign of the Liberals anywhere at Queen's Park this morning. Just the lone NDP bus, a handful of reporters, and NDP leader Andrea Horwath coming up to the Unimic and at least being there, providing some live content on the day of the morning of the official launch of the election. I'm curious, though, Dave, your selection of music, that kind of made it sound like this is a clown show that's coming up here. Is this your editorial comment via music on the election? I don't know if that's necessarily fair, but it's certainly going to be an interesting campaign. It's going to be different, and I'd complained before about the way they corralled us on media buses, but I wondered what the alternative was. Well, now we're beginning to see what the alternative is.
Yeah.
So even though the NDP had a campaign bus there this morning, and quite a few reporters, several of them were then not getting on that bus. They were hopping off to Green Leader Mike Schreiner's event up in Scarborough. So the people are just going to be that's how it's going to be. So when the NDP takes a northern tour, there will be a few reporters sign on for the flight. But otherwise, it's going to be a catch-as-catch-can kind of election for coverage. And that means I think we'll see a lot of the leaders staying very close to the 905, not so much Queen's Park and the 416, but the 905 in particular. We're going to see them concentrate there. And obviously, the Progressive Conservatives and Ford's budget made it very clear that's what they're doing. I mean, it's all about the big infrastructure projects, particularly highways, roads, bridges, hospitals, long-term care homes. That's where they see the post-pandemic recovery. They want to lead that post-pandemic recovery. They just don't want to mention that word pandemic.
Well, you know what, though? I mean, you talk about the date of the election, and the 29 days were less than a month, Sabrina, and this is a sprint. I mean, really is going to be a sprint. And there have been past elections where it's been a little longer and it has dragged on. We're going to get a week interrupted here by the debate itself. So all of a sudden, that 29 days gets shortened down in a hurry. And if they're going to run to the finish, and like my dad used to say, run through the tape because you can't let up at the finish line, the Liberals right now seem to have some momentum. But, let's face it, Doug Ford and team have already been in sprint mode for a while on this one. So it's going to be kind of an interesting dynamic from that point of view.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of us have felt like it's been campaign mode for months. Even there's been this steady string of announcements, platform goodies coming out. We had a not quite fully costed platform from the NDP, the PC's budget, which is standing in as their platform. The Liberals have been putting stuff out piecemeal for weeks now. But, campaigns matter. So obviously all the polls are putting Doug Ford and the Conservatives, in a good shot for re-election. I think the bigger question for them is, whether that's a majority or a minority. It'll probably come down to a lot of regional races. Keith mentioned the 905 vote-rich area can make or break you when it comes to majority minority. And now we're seeing the Liberals overtake the NDP, which I think probably speaks to a strong Liberal brand in Ontario. There was a poll out from Innovative Research Group that suggested, that's taken a bit of a hit, and a lot of Ontarians identify themselves still as liberal, but more so PCs. So it kind of feels like it's anybody's game, and these next couple of weeks leading up to June 2nd are really going to matter. The opposition parties are going to make their case to voters, and a lot can change. So I think also, the Conservatives doing so well and sort of sitting pretty in a lot of polls can kind of galvanize your opponents too. Like if you're a liberal, you're a dipper, hearing that the Conservatives are on track to win re-election, it might actually like bring you out to the polls. I think, something else that we're contending with is possible voter fatigue, voter apathy. We just went to the polls in September federally, and there's an election coming up municipally, our cities and towns in October. The paperwork's already being filed for that. So John Tory throwing his hat in the ring. So, I mean, it's just like election on election. And that's part of the risk here, is that voters just won't be motivated to go out and vote. And that tends to support the status quo, the Ford government.
And we'll always look for wrinkles or sort of those left-wing issues that kind of pop up out of nowhere, Keith. And it might sound left-wing-ish in terms of not ideology, but from, an extreme circumstance. But I wonder to what degree Roe v. Wade is going to actually have an effect on the narrative in this election campaign.
Well, I actually put it on my bingo card for this election campaign after what happened in the United States this week. I thought it absolutely could. And of course, we saw the New Democrats come out right away and say, we're the only party that is absolutely going to guarantee a woman's right to choice every single time. There's no members of our party that are going to be in any way ever opposed to this thing. Something the Liberals always had trouble saying, till finally Trudeau federally stamped down on it, but we haven't heard the provincial Liberals talk about it. And of course, we know Premier Ford has his junior education minister, Sam Osterhoff, is all about, making abortion unthinkable in our lifetime. This is his goal. So he's one of the youngest members of the legislature, if not the youngest still. But I mean, he's a powerful member in that Conservative caucus, and there's more than one voice that feels that in that caucus. So absolutely Roe v. Wade could come into this play. And it could come in the sense, I think, especially when the Conservatives seem to be on one side of this issue versus the more progressives. The goal seems to be, certainly from Andrea Horwath's point of view, and I'm sure the Liberals as well with Stephen Del Duca, to defeat Doug Ford. So we know then from Ford and the Conservatives' point of view, the best thing they can have is the Liberals and the NDP running neck and neck in most of these ridings, and the Conservatives just clean up because they're taking away votes from each other, not from the Conservatives. So this is is it a battle for second place at this point, or can someone actually defeat Ford? This is what we need to see. And as issues come up, that could be, who knows? I mean, people are really, really upset in Canada about this leaked ruling from the United States Supreme Court. So it's, women thought this battle was fought by their grandmothers and that this was done. And to see it rise up that quickly, and we all know in Canada what happened in the United States. We watch all of this, the far right-wing stuff migrate up here slowly, and hopefully it doesn't catch on as big, but it does happen. So I think that could absolutely be an issue. But, as the polls show, when these two parties are neck and neck, Andrea Horwath is right. The majority of Ontarians don't want to re-elect Doug Ford. But when close to 40% do, that gets him back into majority government territory. So that leaves the other two fighting for second place, which is what they don't want to be. And as Sabrina pointed out, in the polls, most of the polls we've seen heading into the election, and even the early ones here, have the Liberals in second place now, even though no one really knows who Del Duca is, and their party has no official party status in the legislature. That speaks to, again, the power of that Liberal brand, especially in the urban areas in Ontario.
Well, I think, Sabrina, a lot of people don't really understand the fact that the abortion question has nothing to do with the provincial legislature. I mean, they really don't have any sway or say or legal authority in any of that. Now, but in as much as it can be a wedge issue, this is an opportunity for the opposition to split the Conservative brains, in terms of one side or the other, and to create havoc in there, because I think people are listening to this debate and saying, oh yeah, it must be a Conservative issue. So they're going to have to put that fire out at some point. Whether or not the Liberals and the NDP are going to split the vote, if they can split the Conservatives and have them arguing with each other seemingly on this, that might be the strategy here.
Yeah, I was a little surprised even in some ways that, how quick the NDP and the Liberals pounced on this. And you're absolutely right. It's a wedge issue. Not really even, have much to do on this side of the border. I think that, it has the power, though, to galvanize your own supporters as well. This is obviously a federal issue. It's not even really a question right now in Ontario. I think we're going to continue to see, not a peep from the Conservatives on this. I think Keith brought up Sam Osterhoff, his stance, his anti-abortion stance, that I think the story and Global News or one of those websites got a lot of hits yesterday. Like, people were obviously being reminded of that. But you have to think, like, Sam Osterhoff, he represents a Tory bastion. He could probably be an MPP for as long as he wants. He took over from Tim Hudak, who, handily won the riding. It's Niagara West now. We've had some border changes in the last round. But, we don't really vote for, I don't know if it will really impact, how people will vote. I mean, his constituents, social conservatives, a lot of them in that pocket of Ontario, they are well organized. I don't think Sam is in any chance of losing his seat. And, the party has kind of just let him speak to these issues as he sees fit. But at the end of the day, I kind of worry that this is being politicized, maybe going a little bit too far, and that could have the power to backfire on the NDP and the Liberals as well, kind of politicizing women's rights to choose, that sort of thing. I mean, it can kind of turn off some folks in the public as well.
Yeah, I'm old enough to have covered bombings of abortion clinics in Toronto. So I don't think that brings it down to it becoming a provincial issue in a hurry, doesn't it? Yeah, and a local issue.
For sure.
That becomes a policing issue, a safety issue, all sorts of issues. And they established the safety zones. I used to walk every day past a group of protesters across the street from another abortion clinic in town. It's still a huge issue, and it has huge ramifications. And the fact that Canadians went to bombing, I mean, when have we seen that? The FLQ and abortion. That's it. So don't discount this issue ever as something that could throw a huge wrinkle in, depending on how it divides. And is it the progressive parties using it as a wedge issue, or is it them just pointing out the realities that this needs to be fought for and defended now? And if that takes politics to do it, well, that's politics. But something has to be done, because it will come under threat. And we saw the federal Conservatives, first thing, okay, we'll put out a statement, nobody else comment. That's it. Ixnay on the abortion. Done. I don't think that bodes well for the Ford Conservatives. Depending on how this issue plays, it could, quickly drop down. Let's face it, the number one issue in this campaign is affordability. Healthcare seems to be coming second, which is kind of a surprise post-pandemic, but that shows how bad inflation has kicked in and how quickly. So abortion, certainly not a top-of-mind issue for everyone, but it could quickly become one, depending on how this plays out.
I talked to Lindsay Broadhead. She's the senior vice president at the Toronto Region Board of Trade yesterday, and I just wanted to get the board's view in terms of what we need to do to make sure that we come out of COVID standing up and actually walking to a run, right? I mean, we want to get back on our feet and moving again. And the Board of Trade, the Chambers of Commerce, right across the country, in fact, have been out in front of so much of what has been done and has to have been done to help business recover, to deal with affordability issues. And, Lindsay, right off the bat, I said, what's the affordability issue? Because there's, all kinds of them. Housing. Right off the bat. Housing has to be front and center. And she points out that the area around Pearson International Airport is the second largest economic community in the province, next to downtown, the business district, right? It's a huge economic hub. So to date, we haven't really paid a lot of attention to that. So I'll be curious to see, one, where the promises are made around, that Mississauga or the old Malton area of the GTA. But the second, it will be how much of that's going to be focusing on affordable and accessible housing, because to keep those businesses there that keep supply chain going, everything else, the whole idea is to let people live close to where they work and, avoid the commute. And it almost runs counter, Sabrina, to the whole, we have to have highways. Highways are great, but it doesn't make housing any more affordable or living any more affordable. It sounds nuanced, but I mean, this is really the pocketbook issue. We need to have people in affordable, stable, decent housing.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're seeing those clear plans from any of the parties right now. I mean, the housing bill that the PCs tabled, just before the legislature was dissolved, and is now on the books as law, it was rather lukewarm, and even by their own admission, they didn't follow through on a lot of the recommendations that their own task force had put forward, particularly on density measures, building up, and I think that's probably politically speaking, because of the mayor's pushback on that. And of course, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to sour relationships ahead of election time. So they kind of framed it as this is the first part of our long-term plan. Of course, I guess we'll need to give them another mandate for that, the rest of the plan to come through. But you're right, like the affordability question is so broad, and I think like largely undefined. Like we've got everything from the Liberals promising to cut the HST off of prepared foods up to $20. So like you'll get a cheaper rotisserie chicken at the supermarket. To getting a refund on license plate sticker renewal fees. And I think, just on that, we can kind of see who the Ford government, or excuse me, the Conservatives, I should say now, are targeting as their voters. You kind of mentioned Mississauga, Malton area, the 905. There's a lot of motorists there, a lot of drivers, and there's so many goodies in their platform for drivers, a gas tax cut, highways. Like that's clearly who they're going after. And like I said, it's a very politically competitive area. There were a lot of close races in the 905 in 2018. So we can kind of see who they're playing to. And then again, on affordability, we've got the Liberals promising Buck a ride, which a kind of a cheeky play on the PCs promising Buck a beer in 2018. There's a lot of questions on the policy side of that. How will they deal with boosted ridership for transit agencies that seem barely able to handle, current levels right now. But it got people talking. So that was like a good day for the Liberals. It was definitely a conversation starter on that front. But when it comes to housing, I'm still kind of waiting to see. I don't know if there's a one cure all for that issue, but we haven't really gotten much in the way of, here's the issue, here's what we're going to do to fix it type of thing.
Well, the NDP at least, is offering something, this first down payment, help with your down payment for first-time home buyers. Because let's face it, if you're a warehouse worker out in that 905 belt, and you need a house, you can't afford $750,000 for a townhouse, and that's if you're lucky. So if they're going to build new housing for this in this specific area, affordable to me in that area, if someone's a warehouse worker, two adults working anywhere. Affordable would be, I suppose, $500,000 so that you could save $200,000 down and still have a $300,000 mortgage. Think about that. You're aware that's still huge amounts of money. It's still, at least if the NDP is going to help you get that first down payment, that's something, that's an actual incentive to get people in the housing market. But again, they're looking at $750K for a house, if they're lucky, and that's a starter home or a townhouse, or a condo. I don't know how they address the affordability on that scale. I think that's when you look at other issues and you raise, I think you just raise the basic minimum tax deduction so that people earning under $40,000 a year pay zero income tax, so that they're able to buy their groceries and pay their rent and do all that stuff now without hoping, at the end of the tax year that they're going to get some money back. It's ridiculous. Direct help. And at least the NDP's housing thing is a direct financial aid to first-time home buyers. I don't know if governments can afford it. As Sabrina pointed out, they've yet to put their costing with their thing because they came out before their government's budget, which would give them the figures to cost it with. So we have to watch and see what that is. But at least that one is the most tangible one I've seen that could actually make a dent in helping young people or first-time home buyers get into the market.
Well, dare I say, the content of the conversation yesterday with Lindsay Broadhead at the Board of Trade was what they learned in the chambers and the boards, that the magic is convening, is actually bringing groups together who don't normally talk to each other on some of these issues. And they found success in that during the pandemic. They found solutions. They found best practices. Government isn't doing that. And none of these parties is actually contemplating that or saying it out loud. Now, we use the example, I guess it was last week, the news release popped up from Habitat for Humanity here in Toronto. They are actually building a project next to St. Joseph's Hospital in that neighborhood out in the West End, specifically for healthcare workers who need affordable housing in that community. It can be done. But the idea that I agree with you, Keith. I think the idea of being able to, subsidize, support that initial down payment is a great step. But it can't stop there. We've got to start thinking how we're going to have a three-dimensional view of this problem. And the one thing that kind of came to mind, we talk about affordability, is this story that popped up this morning. A young woman in her 30s. She has chemical sensitivities, and she's having an issue with the house that she's living in. It's become so severe for her that she wants a medically assisted dying. And they're contemplating this. And the reason is because she only has $1,169 a month on the pension she has because of her disability. It is institutionalized, legislated poverty. That's what she lives with.
It's criminal. Absolutely. It's just criminal. This woman is considering having the state put her down because the state won't give her enough to live on.
How can we afford not to fix that? That's what, you know what I'm saying? That's the affordability issue, I think, Sabrina, that the NDP and the Liberals or the Greens, somebody got to be saying,
where's the
seriously?
pro-life people? I'm sorry, but where's the pro-life people?
I hear you. Yep.
No, you guys are absolutely right. And I think that we've been hearing, calls to raise ODSP rates from all the parties. And when the then Premier, I keep calling him that, Conservative leader Doug Ford, when he was asked about it, he says his old line that, the best way to help people on disability is to get them a job. But some folks just can't work.
Oh, yeah, get a job. That's Ralph Klein, when he was Premier of Alberta, went into a homeless shelter, flinging $20 bills out saying, get a job. That's essentially what Ford is doing. Get a job. These people can't get jobs. That's why they're on ODSP. Yeah. And $1,169 a month.
It doesn't get you anything.
No,
indeed. So I'll forgive you for the slips on the government line and the Premier, but you and I are going to have an issue on the writ dropping. I'm telling you.
We all know what we're talking about when we say drop. But yes, for all the electoral purists out there, it's drawn up. The writs are drawn up.
You can say issued.
Issued
is fine.
Yeah.
And drop like an album drop.
Yeah, exactly.
Who'd want to be doing that today? That's what the elections officers are doing, actually signing all these writs.
Writs were dropped before albums were dropped. Albums only came to drop later. So writs were the original OG on the drop.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've deteriorated to that. Means we'll have to leave it till tomorrow. That'll do it. This is the Writ Race version of On the Ledge. It's an eye contact production. All right, so that'll do it. We'll be back at it again tomorrow in your inbox. And we're going to drop this into the On the Ledge feed and the Daily Brief. So wherever you are listening, we'd like your feedback. You can leave us a comment, share it, and let us know what you think. If there's an issue in your area, maybe a town hall meeting or a debate that's going to go on, you think we should know more about it, by all means, let us know. You can find me on the social media at Dave Trafford on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Otherwise, you can just leave the comments wherever you're listening to this podcast. That'll do it. I'm Dave Trafford. Thanks to Keith Leslie, Sabrina and Angie. Back at it again tomorrow, right here. It's an Eye Contact production for Story Studio Network.